We are already far out of the realm of speculation. What you are reporting right now are verifiable facts. That's nothing that could have happened one way or the other, but you have just described step by step exactly what you and others have done. That's no speculation. These are verifiable facts that will withstand before any court. And it is much worse than I ever imagined. I have heard so many witnesses in my life, I believe more than any other lawyer. I can recognize within minutes, within seconds, if somebody lies. It's just experience. But what happens here is beyond what anyone else might already have thought. Because he comes across as very uncertain and weird, just like he would be always anxious about that he will be exposed one day. What you are talking about is an active compliancy, at least by parts of the University of Frankfurt, the Goethe University. Therein is a page entitled Honorary Declaration, but no signature. This is curious. An honorary declaration without signature. One could say that this has no place in such a publication. This belongs to the promotion file, but it is not in there. If you would have told me about it before, I would have said, you can't invite this man. I can't believe this. Man, this can't be true. There is an expression within this honorary declaration. Has it been April or May? It must have been April, probably 1st of April. The thimble rigger gets here 2 federal crosses of merit. It is unbelievable. Do you have this in writing? I have this in writing. Oh, we will need that. Oh man, this is completely absurd. These are scientific papers. They have to be publicly available. Yes, this is the essence of a doctorate, that you make independent scientific findings publicly available to the scientific community. That's where we send our private detectives. When the central figure is under such pressure, I mean, you can even see it in his face by now, then one could also come up with the idea that the theses he represents are also not tenable if he himself is not tenable. In the end, we are dealing with a real Berlin child. It is the captain from Köpenick. We need you as witness in court. First, we need someone to press charges. We are already on this. Actually, this should be whiskey. Nobody can stand it. Indeed, this has aspects of a thriller. Probably Drosten did not publish his promotion at due date. Therefore, the Goethe University must not have given him his PhD certificate. That is the accusation we are talking about. Die Promotionsurkunde nicht verleihen dürfen. Das ist der Vorwurf, den es geht. The attack at the academic background means an attack at the reliability of one person as well. Thereby I found 2 CVs he published in the internet by himself that don't match with each other. From the data later had been appointed via University of Bonn to the Charité. He holds 2 professorial chairs, but there need to be a question mark at this. Wobei auch da Fragezeichen dran zu machen sind Lehrstühle. Professorial chairs meant to be to transfer knowledge to students and examine them and so on. After all I and others could investigate, Mr. Drosten had never taught, at least at Charité. There is no course catalogue that I know of, and I researched for any lecture of Mr. Drosten taking place. Von Herrn Drosten stattfindet. Either he is the only one or one of very few virologists in Germany who does not receive his habilitation but holds a professorship. These two professorships, which he obtained when he moved from Bonn University to Berlin, resulted through the initiative of the Johanna Quandt Foundation.
Durch die Initiative der Johanna Quandt Stiftung.
The Quandts are still one of the richest families in this country. Multi-billionaires, the main shareholders of BMW. Yes.
Die Stiftung.
The Johanna Quandt Foundation decides to support medicine in Germany and at the Charité and initiates and co-finances chairs at the Berlin Institute of Health.
Lehrstühle an einem Berlin Institute of Health. Dort
There, Mr. Drosten was provided with 2 chairs after he comes from Bonn.
Aus Bonn kommt, ausgestattet.
Oh, merkwürdig.
Oh, strange. 2 chairs, unusual.
Auch diese Charité.
This Charité also has a foundation. Many universities have something like this to support young scientists. You name it. This Charité Foundation has 2 board members.
Charité hat 2 Vorstandsmitglieder. Einer ist Stefan Quandt.
One is Stefan Quandt, and the other is a long-time managing director of a Quandt company.
Langjähriger Geschäftsführer eines Quandt-Unternehmens. Herr Quandt, Stefan Quandt.
Mr. Quandt, Stefan Quandt, is chairman of the scientific advisory board of this foundation. He is not only the man in charge, but can also call himself a member of the scientific advisory board of the Charité in other contexts without having to name who else he is. And that sounds great and independent.
Prima und unabhängig.
A strange academic history so far, where some inconsistencies appear. And it is noticeable because 12 years ago, and we will perhaps hear Mr. Wodak in a moment, this man has already failed with exactly the same story as it is now being tried or is now being successfully implemented, and then he had to be considered completely discredited. That is a connection that stands out. Yes, the problem was I couldn't find this dissertation in one of these 2 CVs on the internet, which I mentioned at the beginning. There was written 2003 and also a PhD. Google didn't give anything to this, even at the time. If you know your way around Google, you can set a few options and then search more specifically. There was nothing. It wasn't anything available at the Goethe University, means in the Goethe University catalog. It did not exist at the German National Library, the mandatory place for dissertations. 2 copies of each dissertation must be delivered here, and that already back then in 2003. It was not available in search engines dealing with scientific works. In June, the Goethe University suddenly made a copy available that could only be viewed in the reading room and therefore couldn't be borrowed. What one might have expected, because there were so many requests in the meantime, but only one, I think, 12-page table of contents.
Was man hätte erwarten können, weil es sehr viele Anfragen inzwischen gab, sondern nur ein, ich glaube, 12-seitiges Inhaltsverzeichnis. Das gab es als PDF-Datei.
This was available as a PDF file.
Zu der Zeit herstellen.
Maybe that's all they were able to produce in a short time. I did not say that now. Everything speaks for it. So I could show that this PDF file was scanned. It was a scan of different pages, 11 pages. How much, I do not know anymore. So this scan has the date of in one day in June 2020.
An einem Tag im Juni 2020. Vorher können Sie nicht in dem
They could not have been in the catalog before,
diese ganze
so this whole explanation of the fact-checkers,
steht doch da,
it's right there, that it is a lie, that this work does not exist,
damit erledigt.
this is over.
Gleich hat sich ein paar,
The same thing happened a few weeks later with the German National Library.
da gab es in
There were also 2 copies in the meantime, this table of contents, this short table of contents, and one entry that this dissertation was done in 2003.
vorgenommen wurde. Auch da konnte ich zeigen,
I was able to show with accompanying documents that are actually responsible for the electronic processing of this data, that they reached the German National Library not before July 2020, and later also the second one were borrowed for weeks and no reservations could be made.
ausgeliehen.
You couldn't, as the landing system of the catalog system actually provides, say, okay, not now, but as soon as it's free. I'd like to have it. That was impossible.
Sobald das frei ist, hätte ich gerne. Das ging nicht. Absurderweise
Absurdly, an attempt to get this thing in August failed because of the fact that this work should be borrowed until the end of January 2021.
Arbeit ausgeliehen werden soll. Also völlig. Es bekam
It actually got the aspects of a thriller.
eines Krimis. Es bekam
It actually got the aspects of a thriller.
eines Krimis.
You can't borrow the thing because it is loaned until the end of January 2021.
Der
This was the state of affairs in August.
es ist
In the meantime, people managed to get this doctoral thesis. One journalist then went to the Leipzig branch of the German National Library.
Dependance.
There he was allowed to copy a maximum of 75% of this work.
75% dieser Arbeit kopieren. Das
He did that. Thus, it was available to the public for the first time.
Öffentlichkeit zur
But the content was only 75%.
50%.
I tried to make a copy order at the Goethe University, where in the meantime this entry was made in June 2020.
Im Juni 2020 dieser Eintrag vorgenommen wurde, einen Kopierauftrag zu erstellen. Ihr habt nur dieses
You only have this reading room copy.
Lesezahl dafür.
I will pay you to scan it.
Ich habe
I got answers twice from the head of the reading room department who wrote, "This is not possible.
geschrieben hat,
It is not possible until 70 years from now, only after the death of the author.
Tod
70 years after the death of the author, you could publish this work."
Schriftlich?
What? What? Do you have this in writing? I have this in writing.
Absurd.
Oh, we'll need that. Oh man, this is completely absurd. These are scientific papers. They have to be publicly available. Yes, that is the essence of a doctorate, that you make independent scientific findings publicly available to the scientific community. So we send our private detectives. What? You have that in writing? Oh, we will need that. Oh man, this is completely absurd. These are scientific papers. They have to be publicly available.
Promotion.
Yes, that is the essence of a doctorate, that you make independent scientific findings publicly available to the scientific community. So we send our private detectives. When the central figure is under such pressure, I mean, you can even see it in his face by now, then one could also come up with the idea that the theses he advocates are also not tenable if he himself is not tenable.
Interesse.
It was only with this emerging interest in the doctoral thesis that they felt compelled to even think about putting this in the libraries, including the German National Library.
Das wäre schwierig.
That would have been difficult because there had been a water damage, which destroyed all copies of Mr. Drosten's dissertation. No, not destroyed, damaged to such an extent that it would no longer be borrowable.
Schädigt hat, dass sie nicht mehr ausleihfähig gewesen wäre. Die Frankfurter
The Frankfurt Fire Department, and there's also a press report telling that it has indeed affected parts of the university. There is nothing to suggest that neither the photos at the fire department nor what it is written in a press report that any dissertations were damaged in the process, and certainly not that Mr. Drosten's 30 copies, which he would have had to hand in, were selectively included. So one can believe there was this water damage and there was in fact a cellar in which dissertations laid. Then there would have been a few that are no longer available. And so this water damage was 2014. Even then, there had already been conservational possibilities.
14, auch dann hatte es schon konservatorische Möglichkeiten gegeben. Ne?
Within 6 years, they would have made sure that they are repaired, that new ones are brought, that new ones are printed. Mine is still available on my computer, so I could still print them out.
Die Frage, warum
It does not explain why this work was not in the catalog until 2014. So yes, that doesn't fit to the water damage either.
passt auch
Where then did the copy come from, of which copies were made that are available in the libraries now? In the meantime, there is a public declaration of the Goethe University on the website of the Goethe University,
gibt es eine
with which it allegedly clarifies the situation and makes the mistake of multiplying the numbers of questions.
Universität, mit der sie angeblich eine Klarstellung betreibt und den Fehler macht, die Zahl der Fragen noch zu potenzieren. Danach hat
After that, Mr. Drosten kindly and without being obliged to do so, made his copy available. This was included in the doctoral file and forms the basis for the copies that were made in June.
wurde in die Promotionsakte übernommen und bildet die Grundlage für die Kopien, die im Juni erstellt wurden. Warum
When these questions came up, why didn't Drosten simply put this thing, which he obviously had digitized, put it on the internet and said, "Dear people, don't get upset, here it is."
sich auf? Hier ist es.
But instead, this water damage case.
Sondern stattdessen diese Wasserschadennummer, diese Versuche es
These attempts to make it de facto unavailable for weeks via permanent loans.
Plus die Erklärung, das wird erst
Plus the explanation, this won't be released for, I don't know, 70 years.
die eine Hälfte.
That was only one half of the explanation. The water damage, and therefore it was not possible. The second half is that the dissertation is not these 122 pages, which can now be borrowed, but that Mr. Drosten had previously published these contents in 3 English-spoken scientific papers.
Vorher schon in 3 englischsprachigen Fachaufsätzen diese Inhalte publiziert hätte.
also hat er 3
So he stapled 3 essays together and said, "This is my dissertation now." That wouldn't be a scientific achievement in itself because it was written together with others.
Hat er allesamt
He did not write these 3 journal articles alone.
Vater
2 of them with his doctoral supervisor, who is the main author, so that if this construct were valid, we would have the situation where the main examiner, the doctoral supervisor, grades his own work.
der befindet über die Note über seine eigene Arbeit richtet. Natürlich findet er
Of course he thinks it is great, otherwise he would not have published it before. This will also be legally possible.
ja trotzdem
Yes, but anyway,
doch am
in the end it is a real Berlin child.
von Köpenick, mit dem wir
That's the captain of Köpenick, who we are dealing with here. He tries to give the impression that there was first a work and then the publication. But it is exactly the other way around. I hope that no one will go on an independent rampage where the rest of the university doesn't even know about it. Although that might still be the best explanation for the university. But if the University of Frankfurt says we didn't need a dissertation because we have these 3 essays, then the dissertation could not have existed. This makes no sense from top to bottom. This strange behavior is to be seen nationwidely. In Leipzig, in all the places you have investigated, people have tried to throw sand over this story and try to protect the man with obviously flatly lied stories. Actually, this should be whiskey. Nobody can stand it. You can read that he submitted this dissertation in 2002. This is a negligible formal error. It is not because this shows again that something is wrong. These are pieces of a puzzle which obviously proves a particularly gross science fraud. This is how I would see it now.
Groben Wissenschaftsbetrug belegt. So würde ich das jetzt sehen. Ich wusste das nicht, was Sie mir...
Yes, there can be no doubt about it.
Da kann doch kein Zweifel dran bestehen.
In it, there is a page that is overwritten as honorary declaration,
die aber keine Unterschrift.
Which, however, does not carry a signature.
Schon merkwürdig.
Is already strange. A verbatim statement that is not signed.
Könnte man sagen,
now you could say that it has no place in this publication, it belongs in the doctoral file, but it's in there. If you had told me this before, I would have said, you can't invite this man.
Oh Mann.
I can't believe it. Gosh, this cannot be true. Unbelievable. There is a phrase in this honorary declaration that says, is it April or May? It must be April, probably April the 1st. In April. So I imagine I'm filing my tax return and right there around Christmas. Sounds strange. But there is every indication that all this stuff was cobbled together afterwards, no matter how amateurishly stupid, and that it must have been discovered. It's almost like the whole corona case itself. So it is about Christian Drosten. I mean, the man who is in control of the world with what he tells us to do or not to do. I think we can say by now that he had the world under control. He has it not anymore. That's another question. It's gone. Now he is somehow a Casper with ponytail, far out of realm of speculation. So what you have just reported here are verifiable facts. This is not something that you can think could have happened one way or the other, but you have just described step by step exactly what you and others have done. That is not speculation. These are verifiable facts that will withstand before any court. And that is much worse than I ever imagined. I have heard so many witnesses in my life, I believe more than any other lawyer. I can recognize within minutes, within seconds, if someone is lying. It is just experience. But what's happening here is beyond what anyone else might already have thought. Because he comes across as very insecure and strange, all in all, as if he's constantly afraid someday someone will expose me. What you are describing means an active complicity, at least from parts of the Frankfurt University, of the Goethe University. Maybe someone has run amok, but now this could be the opportunity for Frankfurt University to take a closer look and clarify things. So if I were the president of the university, I would make sure at least by now that this is cleared up and that you quickly dissociate yourself if necessary. Der Spiegel, German weekly newspaper, in a jubilant story about the young Drosten who invented SARS, who discovered it. Excuse me, that was probably just a Freudian slip and should be the truth. Oh my God, that is the so-called colloquium. This is supposed to have taken place on a Saturday. Yes. So I really hope that Mr. Ashmonite is not a fake who is put in here to make us ridiculous. I said, or you said, I'm a qualified historian. I've studied. I was joking right now. I learned to prove my things. There is not a single claim on my blog without a link to the source. There are no professionals who want to cover up something. That is quite obvious. They want to cover something up, but they are not professionals. No, this happened under pressure. Everybody believed we backed it well. There he sits. When we pull the thread here, he raises one arm. If we pull the thread there, he lifts the other arm. And because he is the famous professor, no one will ask. But now someone has asked, and not just one. Yes, but at least now I'm putting someone on it who understands his business. That has been my thesis all along. On the other side, there are a lot of idiots. We notice that again and again. Yeah, you can't imagine. But it's not a monolithic event. It's conflicting interests. Some want political power, others only want money, others want everything. But there are obviously a lot of idiots sitting there. That's why we shouldn't be so afraid to pee in our pants. I don't do that anyway. But we should not assume that there are genius scientists. That man is obviously really only the captain of Köpenick. That there are ingenious scientists and ingenious secret service competing against us. The opposite is the case. My goodness, perhaps there are so many people who are willing to sell their souls, Herr Aschmonite. That could be. A timber rigger gets 2 federal crosses of merit here. It's unbelievable. And let's really believe that the one who creates all the excitement makes all the marketing. I mean, Drosten is left empty-handed when his best buddy, for instance, I call him in such a way, Olfert Land, makes thereby enormous sums and others also. We do not believe that. We do not believe that something is going on. Maybe through fiduciary contracts, but we don't need to know that right now. The most important and interesting thing for me was, of course, to see the economic independence, which was not yet clear to me, but above all, what I had read all along. I had read parts of you, seen parts of others, this nonsense of the 11-year-olds with their air polluter or what they are called. Of course, you don't look at that, but the whole time there was something. And you now turned it into very comprehensible facts. So this is the captain of Köpenick who walks around freely. You have to see it like this. You have to see it like this. You don't say that. We are seen out there. Mr. Drosten should actually do everything now to silence me. He'd have to give me a restraint order. He'd have to report me for defamation. The only problem is that in the course of such a legal dispute, these very facts would be examined. So that's where he's going to leave it alone, I guess. It actually got the aspects of a thriller.